She still depends on me. My mother laughed as she said it, raising her wine glass while everyone around the dinner table smiled politely. She's 27, Denise added. No stable job, no real plan, still living under my roof. A few people chuckled. My cousin Derek leaned back in his chair. Damn, Ashley, you're really committed to the stay-at-home lifestyle. Maury laughed. I didn't laugh. I just sat there holding my fork while the heat climbed into my face. The entire dining room smelled like roasted garlic and wine, and everyone kept eating like this was normal. Like humiliating me was part of the entertainment. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. My mom loved moments like this. Control disguised as humor. She's lucky I'm patient, Denise said, smiling wider. Some parents would have kicked her out years ago. People nodded automatically, they always did. Across the table, my younger brother Ryan kept staring down at his plate. He wouldn't even look at me. That was the part that finally bothered me. Not the joke. Not the embarrassment. The fact that everyone already believed her. I slowly set my fork down beside my untouched food and looked at my mother. You really want to talk about that house? The room went completely silent. Her smile disappeared so fast it almost looked painful. What? Derek asked. Denise straightened in her chair immediately, Ashley being dramatic. But now people were paying attention. I glanced toward the kitchen, the newly remodeled kitchen Denise had shown off all evening like she'd paid for it effortlessly. Marble counters, custom cabinets, brand new lighting. 3 days earlier, I'd found overdue notices shoved into a drawer beside that same sink. Final notices. Again. And suddenly I was back to 3 years ago, standing in this exact house, while my mother cried over foreclosure papers she begged me not to tell anyone about. Denise's voice cut through my thoughts sharply. Ashley. I looked at her. Her expression had changed completely. No more fake warmth, no more birthday host smile. Just warning. Sit down, she whispered. I stayed standing. Nobody touched their food anymore. The whole table had shifted from amusement to tension so quickly it felt unreal. A minute earlier, I'd been the family disappointment. Now everyone was watching my mother. Denise forced out a laugh and reached for her wine again, but her hand shook slightly. She's upset because we've had disagreements, she said. Ashley always gets emotional when. Do you remember 3 years ago? I interrupted quietly. Her face tightened. I did remember. I remembered walking into this kitchen after work and finding my mother sitting on the floor beside the table, crying so hard she could barely breathe. Bills were spread everywhere. Mortgage notices, past due utilities, bright red warnings stamped final notice across the envelopes. The electricity was days from being shut off. The house was already entering foreclosure proceedings. I just need help temporarily, Denise had whispered that night. Please don't tell the family, I'm humiliated enough already. At the time I'd just started building a real career. I finally had savings, my own apartment, stability. And I gave it up. I moved back in because she begged me to. Family protects family, she used to tell me whenever I asked when she planned to recover financially. Good daughters don't expose their mothers. But sitting at that dinner table, listening to relatives laugh at me while she played the generous parent, something finally snapped. Denise pointed toward me sharply. See, this is what I mean, she twists things. My Aunt Linda frowned at me carefully. Wait, your mom's been supporting you this whole time, hasn't she? The question hit harder than I expected. Not because she believed it. Because I realized Denise had been telling this story for years behind my back. Ryan finally looked up from his plate, nervous, pale. Mom, he muttered, maybe stop talking. Denise whipped toward him instantly. Stay out of this. The table went quiet again. I looked directly at her. Tell them why the bank kept calling last winter. Denise froze. Not angry. Panicked. My Uncle Mark slowly lowered his drink onto the table. What bank? What bank? Uncle Mark repeated. Suddenly everyone started talking at once. Wait, what's she talking about? Denise, are you behind on something? Is this about the house? My mother laughed too quickly. Oh my God, no. Ashley's exaggerating old financial stress from years ago. But nobody sounded convinced anymore. I stayed calm and reached into my bag. That got her attention immediately. Ashley, Denise said sharply, don't start creating scenes. I pulled out my phone and unlocked it. The table went silent again. You said I live off you, I said, so let's be honest. I opened my banking app first. Then screenshots. Then payment confirmations. Emergency mortgage payments. Property tax transfers. Insurance payments. Dates stretching back years. You paid the mortgage, Derek asked. Twice when the house entered pre-foreclosure, I answered. The room changed instantly. People stopped looking at me like I was the irresponsible daughter. Now they were staring at Denise. My mother crossed her arms. She contributed rent, that's all this is. Rent, I looked at her. Rent usually doesn't include stopping utility shutoffs. Nobody laughed this time. I kept going before she could interrupt. I covered overdue taxes, insurance lapses, water bills, late fees. Aunt Linda looked genuinely confused now. Why would Ashley be paying all of that if everything was fine? Denise slammed her wine glass down hard enough to make people jump. Because she owed me, she snapped, after everything I sacrificed raising her. The emotional shift at the table was immediate. For the first time all night, Denise sounded defensive instead of superior. And people noticed. Uncle Mark frowned. Denise, you told me the house was fully paid down years ago. Nobody spoke after that. Denise looked at him too quickly. It practically was. I finally said the part I'd been holding back. You should probably tell them about the loans. Her face drained of color. Derek looked between us. What loans? The ones she took against the house, I answered, and the money family members lent her without knowing how bad things actually were. Aunt Linda stared at Denise slowly. You borrowed money from me for medical expenses. Denise stood up so abruptly her chair scraped across the floor. That's enough, Ashley, leave. I held her gaze. I can leave, I said calmly, but first they deserve to know whose name is actually keeping this house alive. Nobody moved. And for the first time in my life, my mother looked genuinely afraid. Everybody needs to calm down, Denise snapped. But nobody was listening to her anymore. She started grabbing plates off the table aggressively, stacking dishes with shaking hands like she could physically end the conversation if she cleaned fast enough. We are not discussing private family business at dinner. Then why did you bring it up? Uncle Mark asked coldly. That stopped her for half a second. I reached into my bag again and pulled out a folder. Denise's eyes locked onto it instantly. Ashley, she warned. I ignored her and spread the papers across the table one by one. Mortgage reinstatement notices. Tax delinquency letters. Refinancing agreements. Past due balances. Every document connected to the house. Ryan leaned forward slowly, staring at the paperwork like he'd seen some of it before. The room stayed dead quiet while relatives read the numbers. That can't be right, Aunt Linda whispered. It is, I said. Then I finally explained everything. 3 years earlier, debt collectors started calling the house non-stop. At first I thought it was a mistake. Then I found gambling statements hidden inside unopened mail, high-interest loans, credit cards maxed out under cash advance withdrawals. The house was weeks away from foreclosure. She told me she just needed temporary help, I said. Denise looked furious now, but underneath it was panic. She had no choice, I continued. The bank wouldn't stop proceedings unless somebody refinanced the debt. Uncle Mark looked at me carefully. You refinanced it? I nodded. I emptied my savings, took on legal responsibility, put my name on everything necessary to stop the foreclosure. Denise suddenly pointed at me. And now you're humiliating me after I raised you. There it was. The same line she always used whenever she lost control. But this time it didn't work. Because now everyone else was putting pieces together too. The kitchen remodel. The shopping sprees. The borrowed money. The stories that never matched. Ryan finally spoke up quietly. She's telling the truth. Denise turned toward him like she'd been slapped. You knew, she whispered. Ryan looked sick. I knew enough. That was the moment everything broke. Not because of the paperwork. Because the last person protecting her had stopped. Denise lunged toward the documents, trying to gather them up, but I placed my hand over the ownership papers before she could touch them. You told everyone I lived off you, I said. Nobody looked away. But you were living off me. Then I slid the final document across the table. The ownership agreement. Nobody spoke for several seconds. The only sound in the room was the faint buzz of the dining room light overhead, while Uncle Mark picked up the ownership agreement and read it twice. Then a third time. Ashley owns majority interest in the property, he said slowly. Aunt Linda covered her mouth. Derek stared directly at my mother. You told everybody this was your house. Denise looked trapped now, completely trapped. Because there was no emotional spin left once paperwork was sitting in front of everyone. The truth came out piece by piece after that. The gambling debt. The unpaid property taxes. The second mortgage she never told anyone about. The private loans from relatives she'd collected while pretending she was financially stable. 3 years earlier, the bank had been preparing to take the house completely. Denise had nowhere to go, no savings left, no way to refinance on her own. So I stepped in. I co-signed everything. Then eventually took over most of the financial responsibility, entirely, because the lenders wouldn't continue negotiations otherwise. And after the crisis passed, my mother slowly rewrote the story. Publicly, she became the generous parent, helping her struggling daughter. Privately, she kept handing me bills. At first, I stayed quiet because I was embarrassed, then because I didn't want to destroy the family, then because every time I tried to push back, Denise cried and told me I was abandoning her. Family protects family, she'd say. But family wasn't what this had become. It had become control. Aunt Linda suddenly started crying softly at the end of the table. I gave you $12,000, she told Denise. You said it was for surgery. Denise immediately turned defensive again. I intended to pay everyone back. You remodeled your kitchen, Derek interrupted. Nobody defended her. Not one person. Even Ryan looked exhausted as he leaned back in his chair. I didn't say anything because I knew she'd explode, he admitted quietly. She always does. Denise looked around the table desperately, searching for somebody to rescue her. Nobody did. Then she looked at me. Not angry anymore. Scared. Ashley, she said weakly, don't destroy this family over money. I held her gaze. You already destroyed it when you made me your excuse. Silence. Heavy silence. The kind that settles after people realize they've believed a lie for years. Then Uncle Mark pushed his chair back slowly. You lied to all of us. Denise opened her mouth but nothing came out. For the first time in my life, she had no control over the room. I finally told them the last part. I already signed paperwork for an apartment, I said. I'm leaving. Denise blinked hard. What? The house gets sold or you refinance without me, but I'm done paying for this. That hit her harder than everything else. Because she genuinely believed I would stay forever. That no matter how badly she treated me publicly, I'd keep protecting her privately. But I was done. Dinner ended awkwardly after that. Nobody went back to eating. People gathered their coats quietly while Denise sat frozen at the table surrounded by paperwork she could no longer hide from. And when I walked outside, something happened that had never happened before. People followed me. Not her. Aunt Linda hugged me in the driveway. Derek apologized for the jokes. Uncle Mark asked if I needed help moving. Even Ryan came outside and stood beside me without saying much. But he stayed. A few days later, I stood beside my car loading the last of my boxes, while sale paperwork sat signed inside the house. The foreclosure notices were gone. The debt collectors had stopped calling. And my mother stood silently in the doorway, watching me leave without a single word left to control me with. For years, my mother told everyone I depended on her. The truth was, the only thing keeping that house standing was me.